This is an audio version of an article written by an anonymous survivor of child sexual exploitation, or CSA, who is a member of Football Lads and Lasses Against Fascism. Communities nationwide are worried about a lack of transparency, meaningful progress, and a willingness from service professionals and authorities to accept responsibility with regards to their failings on recent and historic child sexual exploitation cases. There has been a growing sense of mistrust and anger which the far right has capitalised on and identified as a propaganda and recruitment tool. This has led to some survivors' stories being hijacked by the far right, often against their wishes, in order to spread discrimination and recruit others into their ranks, thus further exploiting survivors. Local communities are vulnerable to this, as many people are desperately looking for answers and assurance that lessons have been and will be learnt. The far-right narrative aims to push accountability in the wrong places, with many groups claiming that sexual abuse is a racial issue and that the whole Muslim community are complicit in it. They also focus solely on white girls and disregard the horrific experiences of young people from other backgrounds, cultures and ethnicities. The far right also ignore male abuse survivors. Perpetrators of child sexual exploitation are often in a position of power to the victim, such as movie star, millionaire, football coach, family member, religious leader, famous musician, social media influencer, TV personality, role model, etc. The list goes on. A key theme in many recent child sexual exploitation cases, for example, so-called grooming gangs, Barry Bennell and historic child sexual exploitation cases in UK football, and the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, is that victims were often extremely vulnerable and from complex backgrounds with little to no role models and an absence of primary caregivers such as parents. It is not ethnicity or culture that determines how perpetrators identify their victims. It is usually class. Young people from working class backgrounds have less access to services, and due to labelling and stereotyping, telltale behaviours are usually brushed aside as bad behaviour. Further to this, working class young people are segregated from wider society, which makes them extra vulnerable to being targeted. Authorities in the UK have long discriminated against and failed to listen to vulnerable working class young people, which often means things such as child sexual exploitation can be missed. This is well documented. It is important to remember that most sexual abusers in the UK are white, and also that child sexual exploitation cases affect young women and men of all backgrounds and cultures. Muslim survivors of child sexual exploitation have mentioned that because they are often ignored, this can add to the shame they already feel in coming forward and seeking justice against the perpetrators. They can often feel that no one will listen or care about them, as the media focus has been on white victims of such abuse. There has been systemic failure of services to safeguard young people countrywide. For example, recent child sexual exploitation cases in West Yorkshire have been subject to a review into the failures of authorities. The interim report has been released and is conducted by Dr. Peel. The Peel report states that service professionals, including the police, pinned blame on two of the victims that came forward. Service professionals felt that the victims were merely behaving in an over-sexualised manner and went as far as to record the girls' statements about the abuse, but took no action, blaming certain behaviours on the service users. Victim blaming, bias and labelling, and lack of action feature predominantly in child sexual exploitation cases, as does lack of accountability and poor decision making. Such instances are completely unacceptable. For any professional to brush off potential safeguarding issues by blaming the victim is not good enough. This absolute failure in safeguarding has allowed prolific child sexual exploitation cases to continue and has led to some perpetrators escaping justice. Many far-right groups often claim to march against so-called grooming gangs, but they will not address the large number of convicted paedophiles in their ranks or their casual misogyny towards women. The majority of far-right protests on grooming gangs are not grounded in legitimate community problems, and they should be labelled for what they often are: a far-right fascist march with the intention of targeting Muslims and other minority ethnic groups. Survivors need genuine change, and to be involved where possible in the conversations and reflections so that we can build a more cohesive structure that doesn't just ignore the concerns of the people that have been affected by this issue. It is not just policy change that is needed, but indeed a change of culture among professionals as well. We stand with all survivors of child sexual exploitation, and we won't sit by and let the far right further exploit survivors for their own selfish gain. Love and solidarity to all victims of child sexual exploitation abuse. Thank you for listening, everyone. Take care.